Protection is not built. It emerges when coherence stabilizes.
The Umbral cannot touch aligned consciousness, and this is why.
Dark magicians do not create power. They borrow it from fragmented minds.
The Arcturian field does not protect individuals' tent. It stabilizes reality.
There is a fundamental misunderstanding about darkness. Most people believe darkness attacks, that it hunts, that it invades. This belief alone already places consciousness in a vulnerable position, because darkness does not conquer through force. It survives through collapse. Collapse of clarity, collapse of coherence, collapse of inner alignment. And that is why the Arcturians were never trained as warriors. They do not fight shadows. They do not engage chaos. They do not confront the Umbral. They operate from a principle far older than conflict: incompatibility of frequency. Where coherence is absolute, distortion cannot remain. This transmission exists to correct a dangerous illusion, the illusion that protection is something you add. Protection is not added, it is revealed when alignment becomes stable. There are entities described across esoteric traditions as dark magicians, masters of manipulation, rulers of dense astral hierarchies, architects of fear-based systems. But listen carefully. Their power does not come from darkness itself. Darkness generates nothing. Their power comes from borrowed coherence, from fragmented minds, from emotional leakage, from consciousness trapped in reaction. Dark magicians do not create control. They harvest instability. And instability is never permanent unless it is fed. This is why the Umbral was never a battlefield. It was always a filter, a vibrational threshold that only sustains itself as long as consciousness remains divided within itself. The Arcturian understanding of the Umbral is precise and unsettling. The Umbral does not exist to punish, it exists to reflect incoherence. And reflection ends the moment coherence stabilizes. This is where the dark magicians encounter their absolute limit. They do not fear light. Light can be bent, distorted, ritualized, even mimicked. What they cannot survive is clarity without noise. They cannot attach to a consciousness that does not oscillate. They cannot influence a field that does not negotiate with fear. They cannot access a mind that does not fragment under pressure. This is why Arcturian presence is not described as a rival, but as anchoring. Where Arcturian coherence anchors, astral hierarchies dissolve quietly, not through destruction, not through confrontation, but through loss of access. Understand this clearly before going further. This transmission is not about entities, it is about states of consciousness. Dark magicians symbolize mastery of distortion. The Arcturians embody mastery of coherence. One feeds on fragmentation, the other exists beyond it. And you are not a spectator in this dynamic. You are the field. Aligned consciousness does not need protection. It becomes unreachable. The Umbral cannot touch what it cannot synchronize with. This is not philosophy. This is frequency law. And once this law is understood, fear stops being a threat and becomes a signal, showing exactly where coherence is leaking. Remain present, because what follows is not a story of war between light and darkness. It is a precise explanation of why aligned consciousness is untouchable, and why the Arcturians never needed to fight the shadows.
Chapter 1. Dark Magicians. Control as a technology of consciousness. Dark magicians are often imagined as figures wrapped in shadow, cloaked in ritual, commanding fear through symbols and force. But that image is only the surface layer. From a deeper perspective, dark magicians are not defined by darkness itself. They are defined by precision. They represent consciousness trained to exploit instability, not emotional chaos in general, but specific points where awareness loses coherence. Their true mastery is not magic, it is control architecture. Dark magicians do not generate power. This is essential to understand. They do not create energy. They do not sustain themselves. They redirect coherence that is already leaking. This is why they require complex hierarchies, rituals, symbols, and intermediaries. They are not sovereign. They are dependent systems. Their entire structure exists to harvest, channel, and stabilize borrowed energy. From an Arcturian perspective, dark magicians function like parasitic intelligences of order, not chaos. Chaos is inefficient. Chaos dissipates energy too quickly. Dark magicians specialize in something far more refined: controlled instability. Enough disorder to fragment consciousness, but enough structure to maintain dominance. This is why umbral domains are described as castles, citadels, towers, labyrinths. These are not aesthetic descriptions. They are maps of control systems. Every labyrinth has a purpose: to prevent exit through confusion. Every tower has a purpose: to observe and regulate flow. Every citadel has a purpose: to centralize power. Dark magicians do not rule through chaos. They rule through managed distortion. This is why fear alone is not enough. Fear by itself burns out quickly. Dark magicians require fear to become identity. They cultivate guilt that does not resolve, shame that loops, conflict that never integrates. Because once fear becomes identity, consciousness begins to self-regulate in favor of its own captivity. At that point, no external force is needed. Control becomes self-sustaining. This is the most important revelation of this chapter. Dark magicians do not enslave consciousness. They train it to enslave itself. They introduce narratives that fracture perception. You are weak. You are impure. You must prove yourself. You are unworthy of stability. Once these ideas take root, the system no longer needs enforcement. The mind becomes the warden. This is why dark magicians value intellect so highly. Not wisdom, not clarity. Intellect detached from coherence. An intelligent mind without alignment becomes the perfect instrument of control. It rationalizes fear. It justifies guilt. It defends fragmentation. And this is why dark magicians are often described as cold, composed, and unshaken. Not because they are powerful, but because they do not feel. Feeling introduces variability. Variability disrupts control. From this angle, dark magicians are not monsters. They are engineers of distortion. They understand how symbols override logic, how repetition installs belief, how authority collapses discernment, how urgency suspends coherence. And they apply this knowledge relentlessly. But here is the limit they cannot cross. They cannot access integrated consciousness. They cannot fragment what does not oscillate. They cannot hijack what does not react. They cannot influence what does not negotiate with fear. This is why dark magicians depend on intermediaries. They rarely approach coherence directly. They operate through suggestion, projection, emotional contagion, and environmental saturation. They move through noise. And this is precisely why they fail in the presence of Arcturian coherence. Arcturian consciousness does not react. It does not defend. It does not oppose. It stabilizes. And stabilization removes all leverage. Understand this clearly before proceeding. Dark magicians are not defeated by resistance. Resistance feeds the system. They are neutralized by non-participation, by a field that does not provide grip, by a consciousness that remains whole under pressure. This is why the Umbral cannot touch aligned consciousness, not because it is protected, but because there is nothing to attach to. Chapter 2. The Umbral as a self-sustaining frequency system. The Umbral has been misunderstood for centuries. It has been described as a place, a region, a lower astral territory filled with suffering and shadows. But this description is incomplete. From an Arcturian perspective, the Umbral is not defined by location. It is defined by behavior. The Umbral is a self-sustaining frequency system, a closed energetic circuit that feeds on repetition, not evil. This distinction changes everything. The Umbral does not survive because something is attacking humanity. It survives because certain internal states are endlessly reproduced. Fear that never resolves, guilt that never integrates, conflict that never finds clarity. These states generate loops, and loops generate energy. Not creative energy, but residual coherence trapped in oscillation. This is the primary resource of the Umbral. Think of the Umbral not as darkness, but as a feedback chamber, a system that amplifies whatever consciousness fails to complete. Unfinished emotion becomes density. Unintegrated trauma becomes structure. Unresolved identity becomes architecture. This is why the Umbral feels ancient. It is not old in time. It is old in recurrence. Dark magicians understand this mechanism precisely. They do not build the Umbral. They maintain its circulation. They ensure that fear does not end, that guilt does not release, that awareness never fully returns to center. Because the moment a loop completes, energy exits the system. And when enough energy exits, the structure collapses. This is why Umbral domains are described as layered. There are levels of density not because of punishment, but because of frequency compression. The more tightly consciousness loops, the denser the field becomes. This creates stratification. Lighter umbral zones where confusion dominates, deeper zones where identity is completely fractured, and core regions where awareness is almost entirely absent. Each layer feeds the one below it. This is not a prison. It is a closed circuit. And every closed circuit has one vulnerability: completion. The Umbral cannot survive resolution. It cannot sustain forgiveness that is real. It cannot maintain coherence once awareness stabilizes, which is why dark magicians fear integration, not morality. Morality can be weaponized. Integration cannot. Here is the crucial realization. The Umbral does not pull consciousness downward. Consciousness falls into resonance with it. No force is required. When internal coherence drops below a certain threshold, alignment with umbral frequency becomes automatic. This is why distraction is more dangerous than sin. This is why numbness feeds darkness more efficiently than rage. Rage burns energy fast. Numbness preserves the loop. The Umbral rewards stagnation. It thrives where awareness stops moving inward and begins circulating around the same unresolved center. This is why some people remain trapped in the same emotional patterns for decades. not because something is attacking them, but because the loop remains open. This also explains why fear-based spirituality strengthens the umbral. Any system that keeps consciousness focused on threat, delays resolution, or replaces integration with obedience feeds the same frequency circuit, even when it speaks the language of light. From an Arcturian standpoint, this is the most dangerous illusion. Believing the Umbral is defeated by opposition. Opposition reinforces polarity. Polarity sustains oscillation. Oscillation feeds the system. The Umbral collapses only when coherence becomes non-negotiable. This is why aligned consciousness is not affected. Alignment completes loops. An aligned field does not circulate fear. It does not recycle guilt. It does not replay identity fractures. Energy moves through it, but does not get trapped. And without trapped energy, the Umbral has nothing to work with. This is the law dark magicians cannot bypass. They require circulation. They require fragmentation. They require unfinished internal movement. They cannot operate in a field that is whole. And this leads to the next layer of understanding. The Umbral does not fear light. It fears closure, because closure ends the system. Chapter 3. How fear-based spiritual narratives feed the Umbral without realizing it. One of the Umbral's most effective strategies is not darkness. It is misdirected light. Fear-based spiritual narratives rarely present themselves as fear. They present themselves as protection, as warning, as responsibility. But intention does not determine outcome. Structure does. And structurally, any narrative that keeps consciousness anchored in threat extends the Umbral's frequency field, even when wrapped in sacred language. Fear-based spirituality does not create awakening. It creates vigilance. And vigilance, when sustained, fragments awareness. The mind becomes occupied with scanning, defending, interpreting signs, and avoiding danger. Presence collapses into monitoring. This is not clarity. This is perpetual readiness. And perpetual readiness is a stress loop. The Umbral does not require belief to function. It requires attention without resolution. Fear-based spiritual systems excel at this. They introduce endless conditions. Be careful. You are under attack. You must constantly protect yourself. You are vulnerable if you relax. None of these statements invite completion. They invite suspension. Suspended awareness feeds circulation. This is the paradox few are willing to confront. Many systems that claim to defend consciousness train it to remain open to intrusion. Because a mind that believes it is always under threat never stabilizes. And stabilization is the one state the Umbral cannot penetrate. Dark magicians understand this dynamic deeply. They do not need to invent fear-based spirituality. They only need to amplify it. Any narrative that externalizes power, delays integration, or replaces sovereignty with obedience feeds the same circuit. Even when it uses the language of angels, ascension, protection, or salvation. This is why the Umbral thrives not in ignorance, but in half-awareness. Awareness that knows something is wrong, but never arrives at coherence. Awareness that senses manipulation, but never reclaims center. This state is ideal. It produces energy indefinitely. Fear-based narratives also introduce another distortion. They confuse discernment with suspicion. Discernment is quiet. Suspicion is noisy. Discernment completes perception. Suspicion keeps it open. The umbral feeds on the latter. There is a subtle addiction involved. Fear-based spirituality offers emotional stimulation, urgency, importance, specialness. You are targeted. You are chosen. You are under attack because you are awakening. These ideas feel empowering at first, but over time they erode grounding. Identity becomes entangled with threat. And once threat becomes identity, the loop is complete. This is where fear-based spirituality mirrors dark magician control systems perfectly. Both rely on constant alertness, delayed resolution, external authority, and suspended coherence. The difference is only aesthetic. From an Arcturian perspective, this is the defining mistake: confusing movement with progress. Fear-based systems keep consciousness moving, but never arriving. Arriving would end the loop, and loops are the umbral's lifeblood. True protection does not require constant awareness of danger. It requires structural stability. A stable field does not monitor threat. It renders threat irrelevant. Darkness cannot attach to a consciousness that does not oscillate around fear. This is why aligned beings often appear calm, unreactive, and uninterested in spiritual drama. Not because they are naive, but because they have exited the circuit. They are no longer feeding the system. Here is the crucial realization of this chapter. Fear-based spirituality does not fail because it is wrong. It fails because it is unfinished. It opens perception, but never closes the loop. And open loops generate density. The umbral does not fear awakening. It fears completion. Because completion dissolves the system quietly, without confrontation. And this brings us to the next layer. Alignment is not emotional positivity. It is structural coherence. And coherence changes the physics of influence entirely. Chapter 4. Why alignment is not emotional positivity, but structural stability. One of the most persistent misunderstandings in spirituality is the belief that alignment means feeling good, that it is emotional positivity, optimism, lightness, constant calm. This misunderstanding quietly sabotages consciousness, because alignment is not an emotion. Alignment is structure. Emotions are transient by nature. They rise, they fall, they fluctuate in response to internal and external stimuli. If alignment depended on emotion, it would be unstable by definition. And instability is precisely what the umbral exploits. Structural stability, on the other hand, does not depend on mood. It does not collapse when sadness appears. It does not fracture when anger passes through. It does not dissolve under pressure. It holds center while experience moves. This is alignment. From an Arcturian perspective, alignment is the capacity of a consciousness to remain internally ordered regardless of external or internal fluctuation. Emotion can exist. Thought can arise, memory can surface, but none of them displace center. This is why emotional positivity alone offers no protection. In fact, forced positivity often weakens the field. It suppresses integration. It postpones completion. It creates dissonance between experience and identity, and dissonance is instability. The umbral does not attach to pain. Pain completes when allowed. The umbral attaches to avoidance, to the refusal to feel, to the refusal to integrate, to the insistence on maintaining an image of light at the expense of truth. Structural alignment does not demand happiness. It demands honesty of perception. An aligned consciousness does not ask, "How should I feel?" It asks, "What is actually present without distortion?" This question stabilizes the field immediately. This is why highly aligned beings can remain calm in intense situations without being emotionally numb. Their calm is not emotional suppression, it is coherence. Emotion moves through them without reorganizing their identity. Dark magicians rely on emotional reactivity, not specific emotions, but displacement. Any state that pulls consciousness away from center creates leverage. Fear does this. Euphoria does this. Moral superiority does this. Spiritual specialness does this. The emotion is irrelevant. The displacement is everything. This is why alignment cannot be performed. It cannot be maintained through affirmations alone. It cannot be achieved through constant emotional management. Alignment is the architecture beneath emotion. It is the way awareness is organized internally. From this perspective, protection becomes effortless, not because threats disappear, but because leverage disappears. The Umbral cannot grip what does not move around it. This also clarifies a critical error in modern spiritual culture, confusing sensitivity with instability. Sensitivity without structure leads to overwhelm. Structure without sensitivity leads to rigidity. Alignment integrates both. An aligned consciousness is permeable but centered. Experience enters. Experience exits. Nothing accumulates. Nothing loops. And without loops, the Umbral has no entry point. This is why the Arcturians emphasize stabilization practices over emotional cultivation. Stability does not eliminate feeling. It contextualizes it. Feeling becomes information, not identity. This chapter can be summarized in a single law. Alignment is not how you feel. It is how you remain ordered when feeling changes. And once this order is stable, the Umbral loses relevance. Not defeated, not resisted, simply outgrown. And now, with this understanding, we can move into the next and most decisive layer. How identity itself becomes the final access point, and how its dissolution removes all remaining leverage. Chapter 5. How dark magicians lose access when identity dissolves. There is a final threshold dark magicians cannot cross. Not because of protection, not because of intervention, but because there is no interface left to access. That threshold is the dissolution of identity. Dark magicians do not attach to consciousness itself. This is critical. They attach to identity structures, to the story of who I am, to the self-image that must be defended, validated, protected, or elevated. Identity is leverage, and leverage is the only thing they know how to use. Identity is not inherently false, it is functional. But when identity hardens, when it becomes rigid, emotionalized, or threatened, it creates a fixed point. Fixed points can be pulled. This is why identity is always the final access point. Fear alone is not enough. Emotion alone is not enough. Even trauma alone is not enough. But when experience fuses with identity, when fear becomes who I am, when guilt becomes what defines me, when pain becomes my story, access is granted. Dark magicians understand this instinctively. They do not seek to destroy identity. They seek to inflate it, wound it, or fracture it. Because any identity that needs constant defense cannot remain coherent, and incoherence is permission. This is why narratives of specialness are as dangerous as narratives of unworthiness. I am chosen. I am targeted. I am more awake than others. I am under attack because of my light. These ideas appear empowering, but they lock consciousness into identity maintenance. And identity maintenance consumes energy endlessly. Once identity becomes the center of gravity, awareness orbits it. Nothing resolves. Everything circulates.
You're on the winning timeline right now. Feel it locking in. Quantum potential surges as your reality reorganizes. Phase lock your consciousness to victory, beyond the void of doubt. Drop distractions, embody the winner within. Abundance, breakthroughs, destiny await. You've seen this video because the universe chose you. Subscribe, activate your power, and manifest now. Infinite possibilities collapse into your triumph. Step into it today.